Okay, the reading from Emmett Fox is titled, Accept No Second Bests. In the depths of his being, man always feels intuitively that there is a way out of his difficulties if only he can find it. The infant, as yet uncontaminated by the defeatism of his elders, simply refuses to tolerate inharmony on any terms, and therefore he demonstrates over it. When the child is hungry, he tells the world, while many a sophisticated adult goes without. Does he find a pin sticking in some part of his anatomy? Not for him a sigh of resignation to the supposed will of God, or a whine about never having any luck, or a sigh that what cannot be cured must be endured. His instincts tell him that life and harmony are inseparable. Refuse to tolerate anything less than harmony. You can have a happy and joyous life. But to do so, you must seize the rudder of your own destiny and steer boldly for the port that you intend to make. What are you doing about your future? And there is a scripture reading from Romans chapter 2, verse 13.
Go ahead and read it first there.
For not the hearers of the law are just before God, but the doers of the law shall be justified.
Now, the Lamsa translation, and for those of you who are new, George Lamsa translated the Bible from the ancient texts of the East. He lived in an area that spoke Northern Aramaic. It was a village so remote, they still had the language that Jesus spoke. And it was discovered during World War I. He went ultimately to study in England and made it his life's work to retranslate the Bible using his intimate knowledge of the colloquialisms of the time. An example, the frequently mentioned, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle piece of the Bible. It is easier for a rope to go through the eye of a needle, and it wasn't a strange metaphor. That's what they said all the time back then for a difficult task. So his reading is not all that different. For it is not the hearers of the law who are righteous before God, but it is the doers of the law who shall be justified. So the title of the talk today is If You Disappeared Tomorrow. And I came across this article long ago and sort of set it aside. And given the number of deaths we've had over the last 6 months or so, I found myself thinking about this article and a couple of others along similar terms. And I don't want us thinking in terms of being morbid here, but I think this might be a good time for us to think about our walk through this earth and what are we contributing. So in this case, it was a small church, about 50 people in the middle of Michigan. And someone at some point asked, so if our church disappeared tomorrow, would anyone notice? And they took that as a wake-up call to be more than 50 members who met on Sundays. I'm not going to go through the whole article, but they ended up creating a major childcare center, a food pantry, hosting all sorts of different recovery groups, doing other kinds of community service, including ultimately buying a mall that had gone out of business and turning it into a community center. Now, the sidebar of this is, without intending, they're up at 1,000 people attending now because they've touched people's hearts. And that led me to an article by Clayton Christensen. He was a professor at Harvard Business School and wrote an article in the Harvard Business Review called How Will You Measure Your Life? And a lot of it had to do with thinking about business, but also using that same type of thinking for your own life. I'm going to sort of jump to the questions he asked. He wrote, "This past year, I was diagnosed with cancer and faced the possibility that my life would end sooner than I had planned. Thankfully, it now looks as if I'll be spared, but the experience has given me important insight into my life." He continues, "I have a pretty clear idea of how my ideas have generated enormous revenue for companies that have used my research. I know I've had a substantial impact, but as I've confronted this disease, it's been interesting to see how unimportant that impact is to me now. I've concluded that the metric by which God will assess my life isn't dollars, but the individual people whose lives I've touched. I think that's the way it will work for us all. Don't worry about the level of individual prominence you have achieved. Worry about the individuals you have helped become better people. This is my final recommendation. Think about the metric by which your life will be judged and make a resolution to live every day so that in the end, your life will be judged a success." So I want that to be the frame of our conversation today. Then I came across an article. Well, again, I come across things, I set them aside until they arise as fitting into what I'm going to talk about. A business coach called Harvey McKay wrote a story. He said many years ago, Johns Hopkins professor gave a group of graduate students the assignment to go to the poorest sections of their city, take 200 boys between the ages of 12 and 16, investigate their background and environment, and predict their future outcomes. After consulting social statistics, talking to the boys and compiling such data, the students concluded that 90% of the boys would spend some time in jail. And if you know the statistics now for particularly Black and Hispanic communities, yeah, it's not quite that, but it's pretty high. Well, 25 years later, another group of graduate students was given the task of testing the predictions. They went back to the same areas. Some of the boys, now men, were still there. Some had died, some had moved away, but they got in touch with 180 of the original 200. They found that only 4 of that group had ever been sent to jail. So he writes, why was it that these men with many disadvantages had such a surprisingly good record? The researchers were continually told, well, there was this teacher. And they found that in 75% of the cases, the teacher in question was the same woman. The researchers went to this teacher, long since retired. How had she exerted this remarkable influence over that group of children? Could she give these researchers any reason why these boys should have remembered her? Well, no, she said, I really couldn't. And then thinking back over the years, she said musingly, more to herself than her questioners, I loved those boys. Think about that. One teacher, she loved those kids. That reminded me of my own mother. She taught in a lower class neighborhood, upper, lower middle, not as bad as what these researchers had. But the thing that I remember is students who'd been in her class would stop by to talk to her and share their lives with her, even through college and graduation. Now, what did she have that was special? She cared about those kids. She'd give them hugs. She'd encourage them when things looked dark. And that led me to remembering a story that Father Chuck told me about himself. Father Chuck, again, for those of you who are new, is Franciscan, but he left the Roman Church many years ago when he discovered that the Roman Church was covering up pederasts, pedophiles, thank you. And he now leads a small Orthodox Catholic church, which is inclusive. It doesn't follow the Pope's or the Roman Catholic Church's hate-filled rulings. But part of the understanding in that church is every minister is responsible for making his own living. And Father Chuck works in IT. He told me about one day it had been absolutely horrendous. If I remember correctly, his car had had troubles on the way to work. Work had been absolutely miserable. He'd gotten chewed out for something that wasn't his fault, on and on and on. And by the time he got home, he lived in the basement of the church. He'd had it. He told me, I walked into the altar, walked down to the altar. He wore his robe at all times. I took off my rope belt, tossed it on the altar, took off my rope, tossed it on there, told God I'd had it, I was finished, I was going to have nothing more to do with the church, and went downstairs to cook himself some dinner. Over the next 3 hours, he said, he got phone call after phone call after phone call from people from even years back who were calling to thank him for how he had changed their lives. Hadn't heard from them in ages, but that night, I will say, by divine intervention, he was reassured that he was having a positive impact in the world. And the question I'm raising for all of us is, what are we doing that we're having a positive impact? Another story that came across, and I don't have a background for where this came from. It was a set of 3 lessons to remember that came across somewhere or other. And the story is this. One night at 11:30 p.m., an older African-American woman was standing on the side of an Alabama highway trying to endure a lashing rainstorm. Her car had broken down and she desperately needed a ride. Soaking wet, she decided to flag down the next car. A young white man stopped to help her, generally unheard of in these conflict-filled 1960s. The man took her to safety, helped her get assistance, put her into a taxi cab. She seemed to be in a big hurry, but wrote down his address and thanked him. 7 days later, a knock came on the man's door. And to his surprise, a giant console color TV was delivered to his home. Now think back, this is in the 60s. They were not easy to come by. A special note was attached. It read, "Thank you so much for assisting me on the highway the other night. The rain drenched not only my clothes, but also my spirits. Then you came along. Because of you, I was able to make it to my dying husband's bedside just before he passed away. God bless you for helping me and unselfishly serving others. Sincerely, Mrs. Nat King Cole."
Wow.
And that leads me to a thought, something that I keep in my mind. I call it the atheist credo. I've had enough atheists tell it to me, though one atheist insists it's nothing of the sort. But here's what I was told, that their ethos, their judge of their walk is, let the world be a better place for my having passed through. Again, let the world be a better place for my having passed through. Now, Marty Dow, whoever that is, talked about love and Christ's love, because I think what we're looking at here is a sense of love that expands beyond immediacy. I'm remembering this as we talk. Years ago, centuries ago, when the Quakers were still new in Great Britain, someone commented they could always tell a Quaker because of the peace on their face. And I've heard that said of the Amish as well. And from what experiences I've had with them, they walk in peace. And that in itself makes such a difference. Well, here's what Marty Dow wrote. In his life, Christ accepted people deemed the moral dregs of society, tax collectors, prostitutes, bandits. However, Christ didn't merely accept people, he also connected with people at the most intimate level. He knew people, those who interacted with him, for instance, the woman at the well, the Roman centurion, Zacchaeus, caught a glimpse of Christ's perfect love and consequently discerned a path towards salvation beyond their limited and selfish lifestyles. To those willing to shed old clothes and ways, Christ offered salvation. He begrudged none, forgave freely, saying, "Go and sin no more." With these words, Christ opened a new paradigmatic path toward freedom beyond the previously individualistic accepted models. Now, in our congregation, we have people in all stages of life, some closer to the beginning of when they entered into this body, some closer to the end when they'll be departing this body. But all of us have the capacity to look back and sort of evaluate, what have we done that we are proud of? And where do we wish we had done something differently? But even as well as we can evaluate and determine our future course, look at Father Chuck's experience or look at my mother's. There's a good likelihood that each of us, if we have been walking the path of leaving this world better for having passed through, that we don't know how much positive we've given to others, that we've given to this earth as a whole. Because remember, we're all star stuff, we're all God stuff. So whether we do it to a tree, whether we do it to our neighbor, it's all contributing to make this world a better place. I think of the tradition of many Amerindians who would give thanks to the fish, the small fish they were planting in the hole with the corn seeds to help the corn grow, or give thanks to the animal that they were about to kill or had killed to feed their families. Even that is leaving the world a better place. So I'm not suggesting that you keep score of how broadly or how deeply we've left impact. Then we're getting into something that's a zero-sum game. We're forgetting about what the core is, that we're all part of this wonderful existence. And if we're busily engaged in keeping score of how many people we've helped, then aren't we at risk of losing the goal, the ideal of just walking in love, walking as part of God's existence, and letting that experience for the earth and those around us bring difference? We don't need to count, but as a way of evaluating our walk and the choices we make, it's worth knowing where we're going, how well we're doing, so that regarding our past, we can say, did I do the best I could at the time? And from the Lift and the Quaker perspective, we believe everyone instinctively tries to do the best they can, no matter how limited it may be by their own damage. So the drunk, the drug addict, the abusive parent, we hope for the best for them, but they're doing the best they can. Perhaps we can contribute to their healing, or at least heal those who've been damaged by them. And then, of course, for the here and now and moving into the future, keeping our eye on the goal of leaving this world a better place. Am I doing the best I can at this moment? What could I do differently that might contribute even more? Now, none of us has completed our life journey yet. Some of us probably have a few more years to go than others, but all of us have the time to change our trajectory tomorrow and the day after and the day after. And understand, as Emmett Fox says, we exist before we come into this body. We exist in this body. And then at some point, we exist even though the body itself is now left behind. We're capable of contributing every piece of this, but in different ways. Sister Pepper, for those of you new, the founder of our home church, now long deceased, used to talk about the fact that when you pass to the other side, you don't become suddenly different. You still have learning to do. But what we choose to do here, how we choose to contribute, we can carry to the other side as well. So we all have time to improve our efforts. We all have time to let go of whatever damages, whatever issues we're carrying from our past that might be handicapping what we do moving forward. You know, miracles are here to heal you. Now, Sister Pepper always used to say, God does promise to heal you. Sometimes the miracle is that you got the right doctor. And, if it's emotional damage, physical damage, just here in our own crew, we have people who do lift on therapy access bars, holy fire Reiki. I'm not even thinking what else, but so many different sources, so that if you're seeking healing, ask. Talk with me, talk with Phyllis. We can tell you who has skills that maybe would be helpful to you, so that you're not carrying stuff on your back that's keeping you from contributing all that you could to this wonderful piece of God stuff. So, ultimate goal, spreading love, spreading joy throughout this universe. And every one of us is capable of growing ever more into it. So let me read one more time what Clayton Christensen said. Think about the metric by which your life will be judged, and make a resolution to live every day so that in the end, your life will be judged a success. Or we could say, so that in the end, you can feel good about the contributions you have made to making this universe a better place, to having touched people who were hurting and letting them feel loved and special on behalf of the one great divine. That's my thoughts for the day. Anybody have something to contribute? Leah? And then Ellie. Okay, thank you.
I liked, the different stories of different things, what have you. I liked how they really, is one long thing. But I like that. But what kind of got to me is what Lori Kay put in the chat room. To her, she was talking about the difference between doing better and being better, saying that being better has the bigger impact. Whereas to me, reading that and thinking about it and trying to listen to you at the same time, to me, as long as you are doing better for yourself so you can help others more so, you're doing better by opening that door for somebody. Good grief. And I didn't think about this. Something happened many years ago. Well, to me, it'd be many years ago. Um, I was out of the service. I was going down the road, and a car was on the side, and let me stop and see if they needed help, because that was definitely before before cell phones. And it was a black man and a white man in there, and they needed help, going someplace, catch a ride to, get gas or get a tire fixed, whatever. And so, okay, I'll take you to the next exit. Didn't bother me none. But what struck me was when the black man says, "Well, how do you feel about having to pick up and help a black man?" I just looked at him like, well, I don't know. I guess okay. Like, what's his problem? I didn't know. To me, you just help. But that to me means that as long as you are doing that is helpful to others, that being better, she's saying, has a bigger impact. But to me, as you are doing better by helping, that inside you are just feeling better. You are just being better. So whether it has a big impact, I don't know. To me, just when you help someone get through the door, or I've had to ask tall people in the grocery store want something on the top shelf, and I said, "Excuse me, can I borrow your height? I need that item from the top." And they go, "Oh yeah, okay, I'll help you." And they like the idea that I was asking to borrow their height and everything. They thought that was cute. So that's just, and that's another way. It brought a smile to the face, plus got me what I needed from up there to down to where I can get it. To me, that's just, you're just doing better. So when you do better, you feel better, and you are a better person than you were an hour ago, a half hour ago, or even 5 minutes ago. So to me, the big impact is you're available to help those that need that help. And that makes you automatically better because you're feeling just something that should be normal. And to you, it is normal helping someone, even if it's to help them put their shoes on or what have you. To me, there is no difference. Just when you do better, you feel better, and you are better. So that's how I see it. And we're listening to your stories. To me, it's all to me, it's all the same thing. I don't see any separation in doing better and being better. You just are. You're on your own path. And whether you interact with somebody or not, it's still your path. Their path is either you help them or not, but it doesn't mean you have to, depending on the circumstances or how you feel inside. You just are.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ellie, you're next.
So Shirley.
I enjoyed your talk, Brian. When you were saying the metric that life, having the metric that life will be judged, make resolution that your life will be a success. And you were talking about the different things that Messiah was, did. And one of the things he always said was, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and might, and love your neighbor as yourself. In Judaism, the first one is called the Shema. You know, you listen and do. I mean, and it's kind of, you know, you listen and then you do it. And then the Lahafta, which is to love. So you listen and you do and you love. And those are, you know, his divine word, his words made simple. And that's what I think we miss a lot of times in today. We don't need it to be complicated. You know, we listen, we do, we love, we're doing and being. And when we can do that with others, with ourselves, that's where we can see the divine in our own lives. And, you know, sure, there's a lot of things that I'm proud of, but there's also many things that I wish I would have done differently. And the divine gives us that chance, that second chance to be able to do those things differently when the opportunities come by and present themselves. So thank you.
Thank you. Cheryl Ann? And by the way, folks, Cheryl Ann sent a link so you could actually hear Christensen give the TEDx talk. So you might pull that link, or if you can't pull the link, just search it on YouTube. Okay, Cheryl Ann?
My mother grew up in abject poverty and an abusive home, really very bad circumstances. But she didn't let that define her life. She was a very hardworking, very loving, certainly a role model. She told me, always use your voice to lift others up. And in your sharing of the story of Mrs. Nat King Cole, I'm reminded of a time when somebody did something very small for me, similar to her story. It wasn't as monumentous as I was trying to get to my dying husband's bedside, but I was trying to get home from Philadelphia, and I was a young lady. I was there for a job interview because I was unemployed. And I go to get my car, and I'm out of the parking deck, and I'm like $1 short. So I didn't have credit cards. I think the bill was like $7 and I had $6. And so I'm pleading with the parking attendant, and they're just like not budging. They could care less. And this lady, an older woman standing in line behind me talking to her friend, all of a sudden stops mid-sentence with, you know, in her conversation, and turns to me and she says, "What is wrong? I need $1. They won't give me my car." So she gave me $1. Now, I was going back home, someplace about an hour north of Philadelphia, Allentown, if you know it. We were fairly new to the area, so I only knew how to get home was to use the Pennsylvania Expressway, whatever it's called, the PA Turnpike. I didn't have money to pay it. I didn't have money to get my car out of the parking decks, but it was the only way I knew how to get home, so I jumped on it. And it was only one intersection where I had to pay, and I think it was 35 cents. I mean, we're talking nothing even back then in the mid 1980s. And the guy in the toll booth is just like, "What did you get on the turnpike for if you knew you didn't have enough money?" So he made me go into the office, park my car, go into the office. And a woman sitting there was just like, "I'll loan you the 35 cents. And so I paid this toll and went home. But who knows what would have happened to me if these, angels hadn't interceded. Some people call that paying it forward. I know that I certainly have helped people in little ways, like ways that maybe I don't know what the effect was. I've helped animals, and in those moments, it's not like, oh, let me do this so I score points with God, or let me do this because it's the right thing to do, or let me do this because I'm so spiritual. It's just my human nature, as it is for most people, to help someone that, you know, is in need, like those people helped me with some pocket change. You know, a little warbler, which is a tiny little bird, flies into my screen lanai here in Florida and gets knocked unconscious, and I, you know, nurse them back to health. And if it's beyond my capability, I take them to a wildlife rehabber. Before, the day before we were leaving for Mexico, I saved this baby squirrel and had to drive it 90 minutes away from my house to a wildlife rehabber, and you know, then the hour and a half back. And I'll just conclude by saying that I've had this fascination recently with watching near-death experience videos on YouTube. And a common theme that I have noticed in them is that when they're going, you know, to do their life review, in many stances, in many circumstances, what God has been, according to these people, most pleased with was the little acts of kindness that they did with people. You know, the person who gave me the 35 cents, which, by the way, I did mail her back 35 cents. And so I think that that there's a lesson there, that it's not that the big things we do that are good that don't count, they do, but it's the everyday little acts of kindness that we put out there that have these ripple effects, that we get to do those. I'm sorry, there's a gnat. We get to do those more often than we get to do the really big things. And we shouldn't discount them, because it all contributes to the greater good.
Thank you, Cheryl. And Maddie and Colton?
Figure out where the unmute button was. Yeah, I have two separate thoughts here. First one, I was thinking about how you talked about how people boast about their good doings and like to share about it. And I'm a person who I can get very excited and would love to share that with somebody, but at the end of the day, is sharing about it more about me wanting to feel like accepted by others, or feel better about myself because, oh, I did better today. Because I think, at least in the modern world, there's a lot of people that I know my age that will like post about what good they did. And it is such an empty good, in a sense. Like, yeah, you did do something good to make this world feel better, but why are you expecting so much in return? And it can feel like very disheartening that you're doing all these good things and you're not getting anything in return. It's because you're wanting the return. And there's kind of that inhibitor between where you're wanting it for the wrong reasons. You're not seeing your good as helping the other person, but your good is supposed to benefit you. And that kind of brings me to my second thought, where we were talking about loving your neighbor as yourself. I took a series of 2 Buddhist studies classes in college, which are pretty interesting to open my eyes to another faith I had never even heard of, really. But in the Buddhist faith, they even talk about loving your neighbor as basically literally yourself, because they believe that you are all one soul collectively, just experiencing in different bodies. So seeing a neighbor as your literal self has kind of changed my perspective, because I've always lived by that as a Christian. But physically seeing the person as yourself will make you want to help them so much more, because you see the pain in yourself a lot easier in somebody else. It's a lot easier to judge somebody else, as it's harder to be truthful and judge yourself. So just 2 separate thoughts there.
Thank you very much. Anybody else with a contribution? Yes, Susie.
Yeah,
And then Doris.
I have made a practice for a long time of holding a door open for people. The automatic doors, here, let me stand in the way, let me get the door for you. And people will smile. And it just, you know, brings a little happiness. And go, wow. And I do get something out of that. I get paid hugely. I get this thought of, wow, how powerful is that I can have that big of an influence on somebody's day just by holding a door open. That's so much fun. I'm going to do that. And I continue to do it all the time. Well, the other day, it happened to me 3 times. Somebody else held the door for me. And I thought, wow, now I get it now. How special do I feel because somebody took a minute and held the door open for me? It takes, how many seconds to do that? And I smiled about it for a long time, each and every single time. Oh, now I get it. And when I think that I have forgotten, I get reminded. So and I do know too that there was once that a little girl held the door open. She was holding the door open for everybody at the post office. And I had walked down the ramp and got to the bottom and thought, did I thank her? Holy crap, I don't remember if I thanked her. So I walked back up the ramp. Nobody held the door open for me that time. And I found her with her family standing there in the little whatever. And I walked up and she looked up at me and I said, there you are. And she looked up with this smile that, just lit up the room. And I said to her, you held the door open for me. And I'm not sure I thanked you. So I wanted to thank you. I really appreciate that. It shows me, it was just wonderful. Thank you. Her dad about cried standing there listening to me. And he was so grateful that I had said to his little girl, thank you for doing such a wonderful little thing. And it just kind of snowballs from there. Isn't that just, I think it's just an amazing thing. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Doris, and I think Lori C. had something to say too.
I think that's a great story, Susie. Thank you for sharing that. I grew up with a mom who very carefully instructed me about holding open doors and letting people go ahead, especially older people. So I actually wanted to say, what I had wanted to say is that I think sometimes it is really important for us to share some of the good things we do like that, because some younger people might not know. They might not know, hey, take the grocery cart from the parking lot. That's one less for the Target worker to have to take. These are all little things that add up, but they can add up in big ways. And all these people had good feelings from, that little girl helping you, and you're thanking her. So it's also a way of learning, not just bragging. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else with something? Okay, let's move. Yes, Liz.
And then Maddie.
Oh, and then Maddie. Okay.
Brian, I don't really have anything to add. I think all the contributions have been wonderful. I just want to thank you for bringing up the topic. I love the title and I think it was a great talk. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, Maddie, you have something?
Yeah, I just have something quick. Kind of what Doris was saying. Like, I feel like my mom always instilled in me, whenever you see something that you like about somebody, to compliment them. And if a thought pops in your head, don't leave it, unsaid, because it's kind of like a missed opportunity to share joy. So I feel like she always taught me, like, if you see something, make it known. So I feel like as I've gotten older, I've noticed myself do that, but just because she instilled that in me. So I feel like as, like, young people, like just friends around us doing that to our friends or just our surroundings, it does like catch on a ripple effect, which I think is cool, even in families. But yeah.
These recent comments remind me of another incident about my mother. She died in Colorado. It was 3 months before I could get out there so we could have a memorial. And my sister figured on holding it in her living room, which was not large. There weren't good. She didn't figure there'd be that many people. Mother had only lived there for 3 years. It was packed, and it was packed with people, shopkeepers that she'd done business with. As an example, I remember the butcher who missed her because every time she came in, she complimented him on the quality of his cuts or something like that. And that is my mother. She'd walk down. I remember once when I was a teenager and easily embarrassed, we were walking down the street and there was this frail-looking older woman walking the other way with bright lipstick and a bright red coat. And as we passed, Mother looked at her and said, "You make that red coat look so good," and just kept right on walking. So what we're hearing here is people sharing their experience both ways. And yes, it's something every one of us can do to make the world a better place for our having passed through. Doesn't have to be big. We don't have to be presidents of something or mayors or something. Just spreading that level of joy and love can make such a big difference. First of all, a message to all of you. If you've been thinking about giving a donation, I don't think we've covered our expenses this month. And we have 5 more days.
Gratitude to that, Sue.
And Phyllis says several people have given very generously recently, and thank you for that. I don't keep track of that so much, except for when one comes in. So if you feel moved, if you go to revelationspiritualchurch.com, there's a donation link there, or you can just call in here or send us a check. We appreciate it. It helps keep this place going. And just to let you know, we work on a really tight budget. We're not spendthrifts here. Okay, so benediction. Thank you, God, for having brought all these wonderful people together today. Thank you for allowing us to share our stories, share our experiences, to joy together, to love together, to pray together, to meditate together. Thank you for watching over us and guiding us as we depart from here, so that we can be ever more in your service, ever more lifting up this place of yours. And thank you for guiding us back here as soon as possible, so we can share again and care for each other again. We thank you for all the good you've given us, all the good you're preparing to give us, all the healings in our lives, our current health, our current happiness, and all that is to come. We say thank you, thank you, thank you, and
Amen.
amen.